everybody, how's it going? Today we're going to make a memory quilt. So the client that I have dropped off their shirts, and this one's going to be kind of different. Usually I do a lot of t-shirt quilts, but this one we're going to do kind of in a more traditional quilt block, kind of 9-patch type pattern. It's going to be a multi-part series. This is part one, and in part one we're going to take the garments that they dropped off and prepare them to be quilted and show you the other materials that we have for the quilt, and then part two will take place tomorrow. So let's get started on the first part, cutting these apart, getting them stabilized and prepared for quilting. Let's roll the intro. So the first thing you need to do if you're making this quilt for a client is find out what the person's interests were, the person that's receiving the quilt and the person whose garments you're using. A lot of times that person has passed away, but the person that's receiving the quilt is there's memories that they have tied into not just the fabric. So in this case, what I mean by that is we have the shirts. They're all kind of they kind of remind me of like a country style musician type shirt anyway. They've got kind of I'll show you this one. They're men's shirts, but they have kind of the little glisten of silver going through them. And it turns out that the woman that's receiving this quilt, she was a musician, and her husband went on the road with her everywhere, and she was a bass guitar player. So what the client had requested was a guitar type fabric. So on fabric.com I sent her some samples, but I found this guitar fabric, and we're going to use that in a block of this quilt. So it's not going to be the sashing, it's not going to be real prominent in the quilt because it's a memory quilt. So we want the garments themselves to be the important focus feature of this quilt, but we're just going to put something that kind of reminds her of her time with him in the quilt as well. Then we're going to follow up with the sashing, which I'm thinking, and I just got a small, like a yard of this, yard and a half, because I'm not sure if I'm going to like it yet or not. So I got red. It's her favorite color to use as the sashing. We'll see as we get further along into it. If it turns out that I like it, we may go with white instead, just so it's not too dark. And then this I absolutely loved, but this is, I hope I'm not shaking. I keep hitting my table, so I'm shaking the camera. Sorry guys. But this is called, it's Red Sunflower. I also got this on fabric.com. It is gorgeous, and I think I'm gonna have to make myself a quilt, which, believe it or not, I've never done. But I really, really like this and kind of have an idea for like a summery type quilt using this fabric. So anyway, we have our backing, we have what we think is going to be our sashing, we've got kind of an accent block, and then we've got all the garments to make this memory quilt top. This is going to be long-armed after it's finished, and that'll be outsourced for this particular quilt. So the first thing I did is I put a new blade in my cutter. I've got my scissors and my glasses. So I'm going to adjust the camera and then get you here in a view where you can see what I'm doing, and we're going to cut these shirts apart and we're going to stabilize them. I'm going to use Pellon's, I believe it is 44F. It is P44F, which is a fusible interfacing. This one, I think it's featherweight. Seriously, Kelly. Okay, it is. I I believe it's featherweight. It doesn't say, or I'm just not seeing it on here, but P44F. I get it on Amazon. I find out, you know, that that's where I can get it the cheapest, and it's like a 40 or a 50 yard roll of it. So, all right, so we've got that. Now, I know a lot of people, I've seen a lot of quilting videos out there and stuff, when they use these stretch or these dress shirts, they don't interface them because there's really no stretch to them. I interface them anyway, and it's your personal preference and budget, what you want to do. I don't like to not interface, and the reason being is I like to put interfacing on these just because it gives me a little bit more stability when I'm sewing those blocks together, and I want all of my seams to be perfectly in line, especially when customers are paying a lot of money to get their quilts made. They should be as close to perfect as possible. So with that being said, let's adjust and get going with this quilt. All right, everybody, so here we go. Hopefully you can kind of see everything, and I've got it in frame here without knocking the camera around. Now, I am an apparel decorator by trade. You can iron the interfacing on, which takes a little bit longer, and you can just, you know, press it on. I'm actually going to turn on my heat press, and I'll show you that when we get to that stage. And I'm going to press my interfacing on that way. It just goes much quicker. So that's what we're going to do. You can use scissors, and you can just cut along the seam here to kind of get your shirt into nice flat pieces where you can utilize as much of the fabric as possible. This quilt is going to be a lap size, maybe a little bit bigger. We'll see how much fabric we can get out of these garments to use for this client. Now, you can see this can kind of be a little slow. So what I like to do, and something to note too, I'm using a 4.5 inch quilt grid ruler. So the finished quilt block will end up being, hold on one second. The finished quilt block will end up being 4 inches square. So you can sit here and you can chop, 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 and you can really give your thumb a workout. Or you can use your rotary cutter, which I do. Don't cringe. I haven't cut myself in like a week, so I'll be good. And I'll just take this fabric apart. It doesn't, I don't worry because I know what I'm doing with this quilt about salvaging every single little piece. The main part of this shirt that I'm going to use is the back, because the front here has pockets on it. Typically I would just remove these so that I can utilize this fabric behind it, but I don't think I'm going to need it, so I'm not going to worry about that for right now. So I'll cut that fabric away, and then I'll just stash it over there in case I end up needing more material for the block. So I just kind of follow along the seam, the shoulder, and I'm basically cutting off the 2 front panels of the shirt to give myself a nice chunk of fabric. So here is your collar and the 2 front pieces with the sleeves of the shirt. Now throw that aside, and then what I'm left with is this piece right here. And this, because you can see, you've got like the placard here, and if I need to use that material again, I'll save it, and I will, but in the meantime, right now I am just focused on this piece right here. So with that done, then I'll just fold that one and set it aside, and we'll go ahead and get the rest of the shirts cut. Okay, so we've got all of our dress shirts, the backs anyway, all cut out, and I've got a pile of all the extra material over there. So we have a total of 2, 4, 6, 7 shirts, 7 shirt backs. Now we're just going to set those aside. And I'm just going to pre-cut so it's easier once I get over to the heat press. Some strips of the interfacing. So So it's ready to just press. I do not interface the quilt blocks after they are cut out. To me, then you're gonna have to cut everything twice. So I cut out my material that I'm using for the quilt, then heat press the stabilizer on, and then cut out my 4.5-inch quilt blocks. I'm not measuring this, I'm just guesstimating from cutting the backs out about how much I'll need. If you're a little short, you can add some right over the other part that you've already interfaced. That's not a big deal. So we've got that. We've got the shirt backs. Now let's go over to the heat press and we'll get this pressed on. Okay, so here we are at the heat press. It's still heating up, but it's hot enough right now. It's at 250 degrees to go ahead and start applying some of this interfacing. So you're gonna put this on the inside, the wrong side of the fabric. Not that you can really tell. If you were to put it on the wrong side, it's not going to be a super big deal in this particular case. You do the wrong side of a t-shirt and that would suck. Okay, so I'm just going to lay that on there. And I just heat this on here. And I'm sorry you guys for the camera shake. I can't really, this heat press shakes the table quite a bit. So I just leave it on there for about 10 seconds. It's just so much quicker than the iron. Alright guys, so we've got everything interfaced and ready to cut out blocks. So here is my Omni Grid 4.5-inch quilting grid square, square ruler. So it cuts it out because typically in quilting you use a 1/4-inch seam allowance for your sewing. So the quilt square itself is 4.5 inches to account for that seam allowance. So you'll see it's extra 1/2 inch here and extra 1/2 inch here. So what I'm going to do, I put a new blade in my rotary cutter, so I'm thinking I'm going to try and line these shirts up just to kind of be quick and efficient. And yeah, see how many. I can probably get 4, pretty close to 16 squares out of the larger shirt backs. So, and that will be plenty for the slap quilt. And then I'm going to do the same with all of my red fabric and with the white. I have decided I'm going to do a white sashing, and I'm going to use the guitar and the red fabric as accent blocks in the 9 patch that I'm going to do. So I'm just going to get these all lined up, and then I'm just going to start cutting them out. You can do these at one at a time, and if you're new, I would suggest probably doing them one at a time. That would be a good idea. I'm just going to line up the bottoms of the shirts, shake them out, and we'll see here if I can get a bunch of blocks cut out without I am pressing very firmly with the rotary cutter as well as my ruler so it doesn't slip and slide around, but there we go. We've got all 7 shirts cut out right there. So I'm going to continue to go ahead and do that through all of this, and then we'll be ready to move on. Okay, so here we have all of them cut out, and then all of them separated by their respective pattern or shirt that they once were. And now I'm going to start playing with them to see kind of how I want to create the blocks. Like I said before, we're going to use red and probably white as kind of some filler block, but also to kind of break this up. I don't want, it's going to be a 9 patch, and I don't want where it is going to be the design with the pattern of the shirt all going the same direction. Let me zoom in here for you. I don't want them all going the same direction. I don't want all the blues together. So I want to use the red and the white fabric to kind of split up and make these blocks unique, but still gain some space. So this is what I don't want. So what I do want to do is make each block kind of its own. And you can do this however you want. If it's a quilt for you, or if it's a quilt for a family member, or if you're doing it for a client. So what I'll start with is I'm just going to do 1, 2, 3, and 4, all of the same. So my block is going to be, this is the beginning of my block. Now let me see, make sure that I can get all of it in there. There we go. Okay, so this is the beginning. Now here is kind of the feature block that I'm talking about, where it's either going to be white or it's going to be red in the center. Then I'm going to decide what I want. This has, I don't know if you can see it really well because my lighting's kind of sucking right now, but it's black with kind of a tan thread stitch and a light blue. I don't know, I can kind of try these and see if and I'm just switching the pattern, so the stripes on this one are vertical and the others are horizontal. And I can lay this out and see how I like that. Now if I put a white block there, I'm not sure which I would like better, if I would like the red or the white. When I cut that fabric, I'll be able to kind of play with that and see. But this would be, once it's sewn together, kind of my one block. Then we're going to sash, and we're going to sash in the sides, top and bottom of each column and row. And I'm still kind of debating, and this is something that you'll do with quilting to see which you like better. Do I want the guitar fabric as the center? Now the guitars, they're pretty big. If I hold up the square, you can see that it won't fit the entire guitar. I'm not sure how I feel about that, and I'm not sure if I use this fabric for the sashing, if it's going to, if I'm going to get enough of it. I'd have to have a really pretty big significant size. It'd probably have to be about a 6-inch sashing, and I'm not sure if I want to do that. Again, it's just a lap quilt. They didn't pay for anything bigger than that, and I don't want to waste all my material and money and end up going in the hole on the quilt. So I'm going to play with this, lay my blocks out, and then tomorrow I will have all of these blocks kind of planned out, stacked, and then we will sew them together and start laying it out and then prepare the sashing to continue on with part 2 of this quilt. So thank you for joining me today. I hope that this helps some of you if you're beginner quilters or if you're experienced. And if you are, you know, hey, leave a comment down below what you're currently working on, and any ideas that you might have looking at all of these fabrics and what you would suggest for color combinations. What should I do with this guitar fabric? So anyway, yeah, so that's where we're at on part 1 of this series of making a memory quilt out of dress shirts. Please like the video and subscribe, and if you click the bell notification, it's going to let you know when part 2 comes up tomorrow, and you can follow along with me, and hopefully this will help you and start your quilt journey. So until the next video, you guys have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow.